Even though my parents grew up at a time in a little town called Vacherie, Louisiana, where there was no high school for Black people at that time. So neither one of them went to high school. They were both just had an eighth grade education. But they saw to it that all 7 of their children graduated from college. There's 7 of us, and all of us have college degrees. We had 2 newspapers. We had the Herald Examiner and the Los Angeles Times. They came to the house every day. I was born in New Orleans, but I was raised in Los Angeles. I was part of the Great Migration. My family moved here when I was the youngest. And so I grew up, it was called Watts at that time. Now it's South Central. I think history is everything. We have to know who we are. We have to joy from it. I mean, not joy, but just understand that we've come a long way and that we've created, that our ancestors were so strong and that it ran the gamut. You have Augustus Jackson, our ice cream man. He was born free.
Hi, I'm Sonia Hollins, and thanks for tuning in to Girls Talk Books. Really quick, I just want to let you know, if you have an amazing book you want to share, visit Girls Talk Books, and in our contact section, sign up to be on our show. Or if you want to write your own book, I've helped hundreds of authors create books. I can help you with that too. Visit girlstalkbooks.com to learn more. Thanks again for tuning in. Glenda, thank you for joining me on Girls Talk Books today.
Well, it's my pleasure. I love it. I'm so glad to
Thank
be
you. Well, I am so impressed with your work. I came across your book, The Ice Cream Man, and I was like, this is such a cute book. I have to talk to her about it. And then in learning more about you, I just learned so many amazing facts about you being a teacher, about, your love for the, Random House, book you're growing up. So let's just jump right into it. We always kind of start with, and I learned a little bit about this on your website as well, but tell us a little bit about you growing up and what you were reading and what inspired you.
I was born in New Orleans, but I was raised in Los Angeles. I was part of the Great Migration. My family moved here when I was the youngest, and so I grew up. It was called Watts at that time. Now it's South Central. But I grew up going to public schools and reading Dr. Seuss. Really, that was kind of my introduction to reading was Dr. Seuss, and so even to this day, I've written a couple of books in rhyme, and I'm excited about that. And that's my Dr. Seuss influence. Even my son, who likes to do rap, he says, "Mom, that's Dr. Seuss," because
He was the first rapper for sure.
And then there were just the Beezus and Ramona books, and I remember just was so excited to get a library card and to just go to the library. It was just part of our family ethos was just reading. And even though my parents grew up at a time in a little town called Vacherie, Louisiana, where there was no high school for Black people at that time. So neither one of them went to high school. They were both just had an eighth grade education. But they saw to it that all 7 of their children graduated from college. There's 7 of us, and all of us have college degrees. And we had 2 newspapers. We had the Herald Examiner and the Los Angeles Times. They came to the house every day, and it's just reading was just a part of my childhood. It wasn't, some people say they read to escape, but I had a happy childhood, but reading was just part of the adventure. It was just another way of entertaining myself. There were no really Black characters in the books when I grew up in the 60s. I didn't really notice, and it wasn't until later, like in my teen years, that I was really reading more Black, or of an autobiography of Malcolm X or Sounder and all those other books that came out. But as a child, it was just kind of the classics. I remember Charlotte's Web was my favorite book, and it was my favorite book to read to my students every year when I became a teacher. When springtime came, it was time to pull out Charlotte's Web. I still have the copy. I'm looking at it right now that I read. It's a big book copy, so that the pictures are really big. And I remember one year I read it, and when of course, I don't want to be a
Right,
spoiler.
right.
Charlotte dies, and one year when Charlotte died, of course I cried, and one of my little boys, one little student said, Miss Armand, you said you read this book 20 times. Didn't you know she was going to die?
Right. That's the power of books. Like when you read the story, it just always seems new every
Yeah,
time.
it is. It is. Even my own book, my first book, I don't know, I'm kind of jumping all over, but my first book was Love 12 Miles Long. And that's the story of Frederick Douglass. When he was a little boy, he lived on a different farm from his mother, 12 miles away. And sometimes at night, after she worked the cornfields all day, she would walk the
Mm.
12 miles to visit him. And just spend a little bit, maybe an hour, because she had to walk the 12 miles back. So literally, she walked 24 miles in one night, to see her son. And he said, when I sat upon my mother's knee, I felt like a
Mm.
king upon a throne because I wasn't just a child, I was somebody's child. And I still cry when I read that book. It came out in 2011 because it's just the power of a mother's love. And for him to say that, because at that time, little black children on plantations, they, some of them read, up until you're about 3 years old, you might not even wear clothes. And you ate from a trough. You didn't know who your dad was. Some didn't even know who their moms were. But he said, but when I knew who my mother was, because she came and she sat with me, and his mother even could read, which was unusual.
What made you
But
decide to do that story, and why do you think that story is important today?
I had been teaching second grade, first grade, pre-K for a long time, and then I decided to make a big switch. I was going to teach eighth grade history the next year, so I went from second grade in June to teaching eighth grade that September. I said, well, if I'm going to be teaching history, I need to start reading up, you know, refreshing. I haven't had to teach that. So one of the first books I decided to read was the autobiography of Frederick Douglass. One of his, he actually wrote 3 autobiographies, but the one and in the first one, he didn't mention his mother because it was the purpose of his first autobiography was to say the horrors of slavery. But later on, when he didn't have to make that point, he wrote more about his mother. And then he wrote about those nighttime visits. And now he doesn't even remember seeing her in the daytime because she didn't live that long. She didn't live a long life. And he said how important those visits were to him, how, to his self-esteem, to his identity, and to know that how much that his mother loved him. I had read that book, probably as a teenager, but then to read it later in life as a mother, as a teacher, that section just stood out to me, and I wanted to write about it. I just wrote about her visiting him, and I wrote it kind of like a counting book where for each mile she told him what she did. For the first mile was for singing, the second mile was for praying, 1 mile was so, and then the 12th mile was for love. But that's why I read it, and like a spiritual experience when I was writing it, because when I wrote it, I just got a piece of paper and I said, okay, I'm imagining them in the room in the cabin together. His babysitter was actually up in the loft because he lived with the cook. In those days, if you were too old to really work in the fields, then you either became a cook or a babysitter. So his mother was at the prime of her life, so she had to work in the fields, but he was living with a cook who was very mean to him. But anyway, so it was them in the cabin together. And so I was just kind of writing the dialogue as it came to mind. And on one page, as I was writing, Frederick asked, why did God make us slaves? And so I wrote that down and I thought, I don't know the answer to that. So I'm going to, and then it's my book. I can write whatever I want. So I crossed that. So I literally crossed that off. I still have the paper because at that time I was writing in longhand. I don't do that anymore. But so I crossed it off and I heard a voice say, why did you cross it off? And I said, because I don't have an answer. And then the voice said, I have an answer. And it was Harry. It was his mother. Her name was Harry. And so I said, okay. So I wrote it and I just wrote what came to me. And, it was very simple. Yeah, I mean, it's really not that profound,
So
but
what
I
was the
just think,
answer?
when did you wonder about, asked Frederick, this, I spend the fifth mile wondering about God, this God who made the stars and the animals and you and me. Mama, yes, Frederick, why did God make us slaves? God didn't make us slaves, Frederick. We are all God's children. A better day is coming. How do you know? Frederick asked. Because I pray, she
Hmm.
answered. And that
Wow.
was it. I mean, that was the answer, but I really, it's like I literally heard her voice answer the question.
And you know that it's pretty deep because we look at slavery, look at the stories of us being enslaved, and people did pray. And I think it's because we see that they still had to endure it that we don't realize that their prayers were for us. Like their prayers did not go unanswered. They may not have been the witness to, the freedom, but they were praying for it for generations to come, and they didn't get to live to see it.
That's why I think, as we owe them, we owe them to be the best that we can because they endured that
Right.
for us.
So what do you think the message is so today? So
Sorry.
why do you think that story is important today? Like why did you write it? What do you want students to learn from it?
I like to think of it as a Mother's Day story. Like you were saying that, we're very popular in February, but I like to read this book in May. And it's the power of a mother's love, and it's our humanity supersedes even slavery. And you can see the humanity of people. They weren't slaves, they were enslaved people who had all the emotions that everyone has. And I've had people tell me that they've read this book because of a divorce in the family. The other one parent can't be there, and or because other reasons that the mother or the father can't be with the child. So a lot of people who don't have that history in their background can relate to it. Also, it's, to me, I think of it as a soft introduction to slavery for little children, to let to introduce it as the evil that it was, but through the eyes of a mother and a child's relationship, that it wasn't stronger than that. There's nothing stronger than love.
Wow.
And
That's beautiful.
yours.
That's beautiful. And looking at the variety of books that you've written, you're covering history because you say you love history. So you're covering Harriet Tubman and even Maya Angelou, you're covering stories on these people in the civil rights
Yeah.
era. So is that like, why do you feel that is such a passion for you to cover those stories?
I think history is everything. We have to know who we are. We have to joy from it. I mean, not joy, but just understand that we've come a long way, and that we've created, that our ancestors were so strong, and that it ran the gamut. You have Augustus Jackson for Ice Cream Man. He was born free during slavery times, and a lot of people don't even know that there were free blacks at that time who were just kind of living their lives, but also knowing that their brethren were enslaved, and of course that colored their life. But you went on and did things like Augustus Jackson, who
Yeah, and I love that story because, you talk about him leaving home, and then he went to the White House. Like, who does that? You just go knock on the door saying, "I want a job at the White House." Like,
yeah, and I wish I knew how that came to be, because he was only 12 years old. But there's
how'd you
just
learn
no
about him?
information. Actually, my co-author was to a writing workshop where they said, just write all the things that you love. And she said, oh, I love ice cream. And so she said, I'm going to write about ice cream. And then she just started looking up ice cream, and Augustus Jackson's name came up. And then so together we did more research and found out, like you said, he worked in the White House under 3 presidents. And he came up with the idea of using rock salt to make for ice cream, make it freeze faster and stay frozen longer. He didn't do a patent. He didn't create a patent. Probably could have. But just to see what people did, there's so many different facets to life and to Black history too. Because I remember when I was learning about Black history, you would go back to, well, Blacks were slaves. And then to me, it's like
Mhm.
you hit a wall. Then, okay, there's nothing else to know. They were slaves and that's it. I could see, well, even though they were slaves, there was still a lot of variety, a lot of different experiences, so different. Um, from there's the slaves on the plantation. There were those who were tutors. There, of course, you had the house. You had slavery in the North was very different from slavery in the South. You might, in the North, you might work on the ship along with free people, but then your wages you would bring to your slave, to your owner. I hate to say master, to your slave, to the person.
Right.
Anyway, to your slave
Right.
owner. And sometimes, and they would give you a little, and so you would earn it, or you had to give it all to them. But there were just so many different situations, and that's I just want people to know the variety, and children especially, the variety of experiences that we had. Slavery was a big part of it, but
And
it
I like
wasn't the
what you're
whole
saying
thing.
because when I was in school, I loved history when I got to college because I had Black professors who were sharing, like you, different aspects of history. When we were in school, it seems like it was always talking about us being enslaved. And then it's kind of embarrassing because then,
Exactly.
your white classmates are looking at you like that's all you ever were. And then it makes you feel some kind of way like inferior to them because that's all the stories that they're telling about being slaves,
Right.
being sold and all that stuff. And it's not until you get older and you start branching out to read things like you said that they were free people of color, they were entrepreneurs. I mean, there are people who were millionaires in our time, value, that were doing great things and had
Hmm.
businesses.
Yeah, and Augustus
Right, and he
Jackson was
was
one
one
of them.
of them.
He was
I
one.
mean, to have an ice cream,
Yeah.
create this ice cream, and he was shipping ice cream around across the country.
To New
Right,
York, as far
right.
as
It's
like New
like
York. Yeah.
people, unfortunately only tell the side of history that they feel sometimes comfortable with. And I think that is what's sad about
Yeah.
the whole DEI, whatever you want to call it, critical race theory, whatever you want to call it. I think it's sad that people are turning back the hands of time to make people put them in a place of inferiority because we aren't learning these stories and telling these stories to people even outside our culture. It's not only good for people of color to read these, but people
Right.
outside the culture to
Absolutely.
say, wait a minute, everybody wasn't what we're thinking was enslaved, or they weren't just ignorant, or they weren't just,
It's a
in the
very good
field.
point.
It's like there was so many variety of things that Black people
Exactly.
invented, that today that we have because of the people of color who, like you said, may not have gotten a patent, or maybe their master got
Yeah.
the patent.
I would love to write about enslaved people who came up with different
Mhm.
inventions, but the slave owner
Exactly.
got credit for it. Because that a lot they got the patent, or they. So that's an interesting story to tell, because the people were very creative and very inventive. And then I think about my mom and dad were very wise. They didn't have the education. Like I said, they didn't go to high school. But my mom and my brother, my mom, they made a
Mhm.
picnic table. My mom, and she would make little knickknack shelves that go around the mirror. I think that's still there. And she had she was so creative. Both of my parents are
Mm.
great
Wow.
storytellers. I tell about our move to California. It's called
Mhm.
All Aboard the School Train. And they were just so good at telling stories. My dad was in the Philippines during World War II, and he was on a baseball
Mhm.
team, and they had this huge game. He was the star pitcher, and he was at a time. He lived at a time where he could have, during, what was it, Jackie Robinson who broke
Right.
the color barrier? Yeah, he could have. They say he could have been,
Wow.
Jackie Robinson.
Hi, I'm Sonia Hollins, and thanks for tuning in to Girls Talk Books. Really quick, I just want to let you know if you have an amazing book you want to share, visit Girls Talk Books, and in our contact section, sign up to be on our show. Or if you want to write your own book, I've helped hundreds of authors create books. I can help you with that too. Visit girlstalkbooks.com to learn more. Thanks again for tuning in. There's so many stories like
Right.
your dad's that aren't told, or we just don't know them. I interviewed a woman, her grandfather was Turkey Stearns. He was a baseball player who is in the Hall of Fame now, both the Black Hall of Fame and the, White Baseball Hall of Fame. And so it's like, it's unfortunate that they didn't get their due during their lifetime to celebrate their
Right.
talents. I mean, and like your dad, and I read that your dad also wrote letters to your mom, like over 200 letters to your mom. And
Yes.
did you ever read any of those stories?
Oh, yeah. In fact, my sister I have is she's also a teacher and a writer, and she has made it her. She's writing a story of their life based on the letters. She's been writing for
Okay.
20 years, but it's called "The Wantonness of My Heart" because that's the a phrase that my dad used when he was talking to my mom. He says, "I just have this
I
wantonness in my
love
heart,"
it.
you know.
I love it.
But yeah, so yeah, that was incredible. And but the letters that she wrote back were all lost
Mm.
because when he came home from the Philippines, his suitcase was stolen or something. So her letters, it's just a couple of letters that weren't in the suitcase that, but she had saved all of his, and we didn't know about them for
Mm.
till we were adults.
And I love that because the storytelling, he probably was sharing what he was going through, keeping her up to date. And she was probably doing vice versa, telling him what was going on. And that is,
Right.
that's storytelling. And you're keeping people abreast of what's going on. So you said your sister is a writer. Do you have other writers in your family as well?
She's the writer. Let's see. My
Mm.
oldest brother's an engineer. He's the retired engineer. My youngest brother is the only one who's still not, who's not retired. He's into finances. I have another a sister who was a librarian. So the three of us went into education. The others were more business. One sister is a geologist. She
I
was,
know your parents are just super proud.
and
I know they were just super proud to have come
yeah,
from their humble beginnings, took a chance and moved all the way across country, and then to see their children do what they wanted to happen. Like that was the whole point.
so yeah, they lived a happy life. My dad lived to be 95. My mom lived to be 93, and they
Did
just
they did they
lived a
live to
happy
see you
life.
publish your works?
Yes, they lived to see my first book published. My mom did. My dad saw the
That's
first
great.
two. I have a picture of him reading the one. The second one was about Ira Aldridge, who was the first Black person to play Othello, who's the only main Black character,
Wow.
Shakespearean character. He was the first Black person to play Othello on the London stage. He was American. He always wanted to. He was born free in New York in 1809, I think, and he always wanted to be a Shakespearean actor. But in those days, you just kind of did that burlesque type stuff, and if you even got a chance to be an actor. And then also his dad wanted him to be a preacher. His dad was a preacher, and his dad was just dead set against it. So at the age of 17, he took a ship to London, and he stayed in Europe the rest of his life. And he played all over Europe,
Mm.
Shakespeare. He became very famous. Um, he had his own little entourage where he would go to, like if he was in France, he'd be saying his lines in English, and the local actors would be saying theirs in French. So everybody knew Shakespeare, so everybody knew his old German, whatever it was. He's actually buried in Poland. That's where he passed away. He was getting ready to make his grand return to the United States, but he died. He just kind of wore himself out. He was about 60, but he freed. He was very much an abolitionist. He almost got when he was a teenager. A man asked him to go, go on a boat with him to down south, just to act as his cabin boy, whatever. And he did. He ran away. And when he got to North Carolina, a slave dealer came on the ship and asked and offered to buy him from them, which could have been done. This man could easily have sold him into slavery, and we never would have heard from him. But the captain was an honest man. He said, "This young man is not for sale." And so he came back to New York, but once he made money, he bought the freedom of whole families
Wow.
of enslaved people. And he spoke against slavery all wherever he went. And after the Civil War, he was going to come back, but then he passed away in Poland, where there's a shrine,
Aw.
kind of
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So you're like me. It's like I'll learn about somebody and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, that's a book. People need to know about that person." So
Yeah.
I love it. And you have that,
That's
history as a teacher. I think saw you were a librarian at one point, doing that. So
yeah.
you
Yeah.
kind of have
Yeah. I retired
you
as
have the storytelling all around you. Now, I've read something about Random House. Either you were reading a dictionary when you were little, that was a Random House dictionary book. Tell us a little bit about that.
well, my sister Faith, she's the other teacher. My mom had this huge. Well, our family had this book. The dictionary was like this, no, like 10 inches thick. It was the Random House Dictionary of the English Language, and we used to play with it. It was a booster seat when we were when we were sitting at the table. It was a
Wow.
doorstop. But it was also a toy. So we would just like look up words, and we were very nerdy. And at the back of the dictionary, there was the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights. Well, that's part of the Constitution, the Emancipation Proclamation. It all of the what is it? I can't think of that other English document right now, but all of these famous documents and the Gettysburg Address. We were just fascinated, and so we decided that we were going to read the Declaration of Independence, and so we would start reading, and then the game, and we made it a game. We would see how far we could get before we stumbled over a word. Once you stumbled, then it was the other person's turn. And the stumbling block was always unalienable.
Right.
We could not say that word. I even wrote a book about that. It didn't get
I
published,
love it.
but so yeah, that was it.
And
We
I love you
played.
said
That
that
was
was your
our
toy. And what I really love is this bringing it all full circle, all the books that you've written, and now you're actually publishing with Random House. Is that correct? That
That's
is
true. That's
amazing.
true.
That is amazing.
Yeah, Ice Cream Man is Random House, and when I talk about how I loved Dr. Seuss. Now, there was a kid down the street, Earl. He was in the Book of the Month Club, and it was the Dr. Seuss of the Book of the Month. We couldn't afford that, but when his book arrived, I would be the one to read it to everybody. So when a new Dr. Seuss book came, I would gather all the kids, including me.
Wow.
I wrote it. I grew up to be Dr. Seuss. I wrote this. This this is a Dr. Seuss book that I wrote because it's called Cooking with the Birthday Bird. So Random House owns the Dr. Seuss franchise. So they hire writers to write books based on his characters. So I wrote this book based on the birthday bird character. And they even I don't know if you can see this little kid. His head's nose
Yes,
brown.
I love it.
But it's a step into reading. It's a really simple book. Look, you have some on your chin. Let it date, then cool down. So I said, who knew that I would actually write
Wow. I
Dr.
mean, it's
Seuss?
like everything just came full circle. Not only the Random House toy, but
Yeah.
also writing for Random House. Like that is
Yeah.
amazing.
And doing a Dr. Seuss. So yeah, I can't complain about that. I just and I'm a late bloomer as far as writing. I was in my 50s when my first book was
So what
published.
made you decide to become a published author? You were a teacher for years. You taught, they say, lower elementary, middle school. Like, how did the writing bug just hit you?
I was always bitten by the writing bug. I would just write little plays and make my siblings act them out. I wrote poems for if it was somebody in the family, it was their birthday. I wrote them a poem. I wrote stories and for my students, I wrote little things for them to act out and to play. So I was always writing, and I was always writing stories. And I know I took this correspondence writing course. I remember when I was probably in my 20s. But so that was always a thing. It wasn't until 20 years ago, it's a long time, that I started thinking about, well, maybe I can publish some of these things. And so I just started sending stuff to publishers, and it was horrible stuff. It was not publishable. But then I joined
Yeah, I'm a member
Thinking
of that as
Abroad
well. Yes.
Society.
Hmm.
Okay. And that's when I learned actually how to tailor it. I tell like my students, you might be tall and might know how to bounce a basketball and do this, but if you don't know the rules of the game, you can't, you have, in order to be a professional, you have to know the rules of the game. I didn't know the
What was
rules
some
of
of the
the game,
rules that you learned for the
and that's
SCBWI? Like, what was some of the light bulbs that went off when you were like, "Oh my gosh, I was doing this so wrong"?
a picture book is basically 40 pages, or back in those 32 pages. You don't want it to be more than 1,000 words. You want the end of each spread, the two page is to be a page turner. You have to, leave a little hook. You have to give the reader a reason to turn the page, to want to turn the page at the end of each. If it's a picture book, don't say she had on a red dress, because the picture shows the dress was red. So just all those kind of little things that makes you unpublishable. If you're not good at rhyming, don't send in the rhyming book. Don't think that white and like
Right.
rhyme.
Slant rhymes. I know I wrote something once and someone says, "You're using slant rhyme." I'm like, I mean, that's what they use in rap songs, but you don't realize it's slant rhyme is exactly,
It's your
exactly.
rapper.
So I love it. I love it. And with that, I also through SEBWI, when they have the workshops, we talk about the Pixar, model for children's books, and what is the problem that
Right.
the child wants to solve, how they go about solving it.
Right. The child has to
Exactly,
solve the
exactly. And
problem.
so with that, we have our little thing we love to do with our authors on Girls Talk Books is our once upon a time story. So you said you did your homework. So let's hear your once upon a time story, which is the model that I actually
Oh.
got from a SCBWI workshop.
Once upon a time, there was a little girl who loved words and stories and books. To her, the written word was magic. With the written word, you can communicate with people across time and space. Every day she would read, and when she discovered a new word, she was thrilled. She wrote it down. One day she realized that she could use these words and make her own stories. She could create her own magic. Because of that, she started writing her own stories and making her own magic. And because of that, she became a published author. And to this day, she still loves words and stories and making magic.
Yay, I love it. I love it. And it's not the end. It's just that's where your story is at this point. I love it. And so, what do you have coming up next? You said you were working on some projects that were to come.
I'm working with my co-author with an ice cream man. We're working on a
Oh,
Christmas book, we
okay.
hope. And so that's,
Kim
and now she
Freeman.
lives in, it was
Mhm.
interesting when we wrote ice cream. Yeah.
Okay.
She lives in Indiana. And of course, I live in West Covina, California. And we wrote the book during COVID. And so we wrote that whole book
Now, did you guys meet each other through
online.
SCBWI? Like, how did you guys meet?
We didn't meet until last year
Hmm.
in person. And that was in Philadelphia. When Philadelphia gave us because Ice Cream Man is set in Philadelphia, they made a proclamation naming Ice Cream Man the book or something. And so that's where we finally met. But we didn't meet until after the book was
So, how did you
published.
meet? I
Everything
mean,
was
how did you
online.
find out about each other to
Oh,
start working
well,
together?
now yeah. So Kim, she was at this
Oh,
workshop
yes.
where they said come up with ideas. She came up with she wanted to write a book, and so she made an outline of a book, and then she submitted it. Random House and my editor at Random House saw it, and she liked the idea. Well, she liked the Augustus Jackson. Kim had never written a book before, and so she said, "Glenda, would you help, co-author this book with her?" And so that's how that came about. So I said yes, and
I love that because that's a different aspect of publishing that I had never heard of. Because when, I've submitted books to publishers and get a rejection or whatever, but to have someone submit something and then an agent or someone says, "Hey, wait a minute, I have another author we already have. Let's partner you with them." I've never heard that before. So, wow.
it's kind of a cutthroat business, because if my editor were not an honest person, she could just
Right.
said, "Glenda, write this book," because I wouldn't have known, because that's what she's done with 3 of my books. Is she just comes up, "Here, I want you to write a book about this." And I go, "Okay." And I don't know where she gets the idea. So but her name is Sonali Fry, and she's a very honest and wonderful person to work for. So we're kind of working about that. And then my latest book is Down on the Bayou. That was with Sonali. She said, "You're from Louisiana. Write a book about the bayou." I left Louisiana when I was 9 years
Right.
old. I packed up my diapers but no, I still have cousins there, so and I go back
Okay.
fairly often. And so we came up with that book and that
Oh, I love it. I
yes.
love it.
It's a little boy who goes and visits his grandfather and he learns about the bayou, which I learned. So that's my latest book, and I'm going to be in Louisiana in November at the Louisiana State Book Festival, talking about that book.
I love
So
it.
that's
I mean, I love the fact because the reason I started this show was because there are some things that people just don't know about the publishing industry. They just don't have an idea of what goes on behind those scenes. So I
right.
love how you're sharing about this actual agent is giving you ideas. Like I've never even heard of that because I guess I never had an agent. Maybe they do it all the time. But
Well, actually, it's not my
oh, the
agent;
editor.
it's the editor, and so she'll contact my. That started when Sonali is always thinking of different. She keeps if a topic is popular, she says, "Who could write this book?" So the first time for Black Eyed Peas and Hot
Yes,
Cheese, you know
yeah, I
about that
saw
book.
that.
She asked my agent if she knew someone who could write like a book about soul food type thing. And so my agent thought about me, which my sister, I have 4 sisters. They think that's funny
Uh,
because they all
oh,
cook. I
okay.
don't.
Right.
I eat.
Mhm.
I'm a good taster. But so that's how that became. And since then, she's asked me to write about the Bayou. And just now, I mean, not just now, but last week, she came up with another idea that I don't think I can
Mhm.
talk about it, but um, that she wants me to do. So so that is, I do have that relationship with her. I have other editors that I've worked with, but she likes to tell me something to write about,
Right.
and I'll never
Right.
turn it
I
down.
love it. I love it. Well, I'm excited for you and all the things that are coming up and the stories that you've already published that we love. Like I said, the ice cream man, I saw that and I was like, oh my gosh, that is so cute. Cause I love, biographies, particularly for children and bringing those stories to
Yeah,
life.
and Keith and he did a
Oh, the
beautiful job
illustrations are
on the
beautiful. It's
illustrations.
Keith Mallat.
Yeah,
I've seen him before in different books as
yeah,
well. So it's a
yeah.
blessing to have a
So
great illustrator that,
yeah,
brings your story to life as well. Because you don't even really know who the editor is gonna assign until you see it. Okay.
they'll give me choices. They'll say, "Oh, what do you think about this illustrator?" Which which is, I mean, but of course they make the final decision because But like for my first book, I had you don't have any say. But now, as the more you publish, the more say you have. But I still get rejections. It's still not easy. I'm waiting to hear about a book that I submitted, and
Yeah.
so far nothing. It never gets to where you know that your book
That's a
is
good
going to be
point too.
published.
Because you may think, oh, this person has all these books. Every time they submit something, it's golden and they get accepted. But
The only thing I know is that
okay.
someone will look at it, and which you didn't even have
Right.
that before my press. But just because they look at it doesn't mean they're going to publish it because like I said, they take all the risks, and that's the difference between traditional publishing and self-publishing. Yeah, you can publish it,
Mhm.
but it's going to cost you. I had a person the other day at an event say, "Well, I'm going to self-publish because traditional publishing is too expensive." I said, "No, it's just the opposite. It's just the
You pay
opposite.
for
If you
everything.
self-publish, you take on
Right.
all
You pay for everything, you have more, and you have
yes,
to really
Lord,
be willing to push. I think, I've self-published several books and I've helped people self-publish, and you really have
right,
to be in that mindset that I'm not just writing a book, I'm being the distributor, I'm being the marketer, I'm being, setting up my own book signings. Like you
right,
really have to get into that knowing you're going to push the product. And I tell people who self-publish,
yeah,
it's not just about writing the book, it's what happens after that the book is published that has to get your money
yeah,
back.
yeah. I wasn't, and I didn't
Mhm.
have the time or the finances to do that. So, but if you're going to go the traditional route, you have to
And you have to know the rules, like
very
you said.
limited.
So joining groups like SBCWI,
Exactly,
I know Highlights
exactly.
Foundation, they do some writing camps. There's a ton of writers camps and writing programs, organizations all across the country. So
Mhm.
I think that's a really good way to even get in and, have your
Yeah.
critique group and find people who are, you can talk to and bounce ideas off of, and, go to those workshops where you're meeting other writers and editors and illustrators.
Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, it's quite a
It's a job.
it's a full-time job, and I'm happy to do it now that I'm retired. This past school year, I did sub a couple of days a week, which I enjoyed because it's like being a grandparent,
Right.
you, you
Exactly.
do it and then you leave, and you don't have to do report cards or bulletin boards or talk to parents, or I may do a little bit next year. I don't know, but it's still nice to talk to the kids and
Do you read your
read
books when
them.
you substitute?
Uh,
Oh,
I
that's great.
do. I do sometimes, or and also, sometimes I'll do a school visit as instead of subbing. The school wants me to just read my books too, so that's another little income flow. But the kids will say, "Are you famous?" And I said, "Well, if you have to
Right.
ask, that means I'm not."
Right, right. I love it. I love it. I want to thank you for joining Girls Talk Books. This has been a great conversation. I love, like I said, Ice Cream Man is my favorite. I'm going to go and get the rest of your books so I can brush up on it and look for all the things that you have. And hopefully you'll be at a SCBWI event and we'll run into each other in person one day for sure.
I hope so. I hope they come back with the big summer event. Remember the big summer convention?
Yeah, they do them now, I think statewide or chapter wide. They'll do them, but not the national. Yeah.
The in person, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I hope so.
Okay. And I'll be in California next week, but I don't know. But, one day we'll get together for sure. And I'll make sure I get you a Girls Talk book shirt. You said you wanted one of those. So I'll make sure I get your
Yeah,
address
absolutely.
and
I
get one
love
today.
it.
I'll see
Love
you.
it. Yeah,
Sure. All right. Well, Glenda, thanks again for this time. And we'll be talking to you soon. Good luck with everything. Hi, I'm Sonia Hollins, and thanks for tuning in to Girls Talk Books. Really quick, I just want to let you know if you have an amazing book you want to share, visit Girls Talk Books and in our contact section, sign up to be on our show. Or if you want to write your own book, I've helped hundreds of authors create books. I can help you with that too. Visit girlstalkbooks.com to learn more. Thanks again for tuning in.